Access Credit Union has always been at the heart of our community through good and bad times. We want to continue to play our part in helping our community through the COVID-19 crisis. As businesses reopen, we encourage our community to work together by staying local, borrowing locally, and spending locally. Access Credit Union is here to help.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healey, 22.99.
Chris Eubank hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to the Star Sport Podcast. My name is Jack McCarran of the Southern Star and I'm joined as always by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. On today's podcast we're looking ahead to a busy weekend of ladies football and camogie and chatting to Rosscarbery's Sarah Hayes ahead of their huge West Cork derby with Clonakilty in the county intermediate semi-final this weekend. We'll also hear from Karyn Keohane of Courcey Rovers ahead of their senior camogie clash with Newcestown on Sunday. We also have a feature interview with Sky Sports head of boxing development and lead commentator Adam Smith. I caught up with Adam at his home in Drinagh recently to chat about Katie Taylor's huge rematch with Delfine Persoon this Saturday night on Sky Box Office. Adam also took us on a stroll down memory lane and spoke to me about the classic Steve Collins versus Chris Eubank fights that took place in Millstreet and Pairc 25 years ago. But Kieran, before we look ahead to all the action this weekend, what are your 5 biggest takeaways from the weekend just past?
I'm going to start off with camogie, Jack. Last weekend was a huge weekend for the Newcestown senior camogie team. They won their first ever game in the county senior championship when they hammered Inagh 6-15 to 1-9, I think it was. And Colette Desmond was the star of the show. She got 3-6. And this win for Newcestown sends them through to a round 4 clash with Courcey Rovers at Castle Road on Sunday evening. So huge congrats to Newcestown on an historic win. Staying with senior and moving to the men's side of the game, Castlehaven are the first team through to the knockout stages of the Premier Senior Football Championship. They beat Newcestown in the Group of Death last weekend, a 112-0-9 win in Skibbereen with Karyn Keohane impressing. So Haven are already through to the business end of the championship. Moving down to the Senior A Football Championship, O'Donovan Rasa are also through to the knockout stage with 1 game to spare. I was in Ballincarriga on Saturday to watch them beat Ballingeary 17 points to 110. Wet and miserable day there, but Skib still posted 17 points without the injured Kevin Davis, so it augurs well for the rest of the championship. And what impressed me was the grit and determination that Skibbereen showed that day. Moving on now to the Junior A Football Championship in West Cork, which is always fiercely competitive, as we know, and the draw for the round 3 was made last weekend, and there is some stellar ties in this coming up, Jack. I'm going to have a quick run through those now. In round 3, Kilmeen have a bye. We've O'Donovan Rasa against Cara, St Mary's against Kilmackabee, St Columb's against Clonakilty, Downey's against Carby Rangers, Castlehaven against Kilbrittain, Ballinascarty against St Oliver Plunkets, and the champion St James's will take on Argideen Rangers in a repeat of last year's semi-final. We're going to finish on a low note this week, and it's the Bears senior football team. They were due to play Duhallow in the divisional and colleges section of the county championship on Wednesday night in Dunmanway, but unfortunately Bears have had to pull out of that. On Twitter they said, owing to injuries, that they cannot fulfil the fixture, which is sad for a proud division like Bears, but no doubt they'll be back again next year.
Good stuff, Kieran. Well, now let's switch our attentions to the weekend coming up, and on Saturday at 7:15 in Rosscarbery, the Ross ladies take on Clonakilty in the intermediate county semi-final. Kieran, you got a chance to catch up with Ross captain Sarah Hayes, who we'll hear from in just a moment, but this game looks set to be a cracker, Kieran.
It does, yeah. The two clubs met at the same stage last year, and Rosscarbery won that 7 points to 6, so it was a tight, close encounter. And it's going to be the same in Rosscarbery on Saturday evening. I suppose the Rosscarbery story is very interesting. They've lost 4 of the last 5 county intermediate finals, so that's heartbreaking stuff. I'm I'm thinking of the Dawneys ladies last year who won the County Junior B Championship after losing 3 or 4 finals in a row. And the Rosscarbery story is quite similar. They've been there and thereabouts, but they just haven't been able to take that final step. They're coming into the semi-final in good form. They topped their group. They beat Pairc, Donaghmore and Bantry Blues. But in a local derby, you could say form goes out the window. Clonakilty had a huge win over Ardlin Desmond's Boy in their last game with one of their younger players, Millie Condon, getting 2-3. And Millie was on the Cork under-14 team last year. So that just shows kind of we're talking about a very talented young woman who's making waves with Clonakilty. And Clon can also call in Martine O'Brien and Claire O'Leary and Myra Barrett. So it's a good Clonakilty team. So there's a lot on the line. There's local bragging rights. There's a place in the county final. And it was great to catch up with Sarah Hayes as well, because over the last couple of years, she's improving. She captained the Cork under-21s to a Munster title last year. She's full-back in the West Cork senior ladies football team. She's now captain of the Rosscarbery team. So she's quite a busy couple of weeks ahead of her. But before she can even look to West Cork, it's all about Rosscarbery and Clonakilty in Ross this Saturday night. We're joined on the podcast this week by Rosscarbery captain Sarah Hayes, who's also the West Cork full-back. And she's had a busy couple of weeks, and she's a busy couple of weeks in front of her. So we've a bit to get through today. So going to start off first looking and talking about Rosscarbery, Sarah. You've a small matter of a county intermediate semi-final against your neighbours Clonakilty this Saturday in Ross. You must be looking forward to that one.
Yeah, sure. It's a small matter. I don't know how small you're on about now, but yeah, a big game against Clon really, and like we played them last year in the county semi-final as well, and like it was a very close encounter. Like we only edged them out at a point. It was 7 points to 6. So if it's anything going on last year, it'll be a cracker of a game again, hopefully. Anyways.
You must be pretty happy with your form coming into this semi-final. I was looking at your results there. You topped your group that included Pairc, Donaghmore and Bantry Blues, and you won all 3 games. And looking at your tallies, you put 2-8 up against Bantry, 3-8 against Donaghmore and 2-12 against Pairc, while not conceding a goal at the other end. So you can take a lot of positives from your form in the group stage.
Yeah, to be honest, our form this year we've been going well, all right. Like we were lucky with the scores we got. Like the Bantry game, like I know we scored 2-8, but that was a very hard game for us. Like Bantry were up for it. Like Bantry had everything to lose and we'd nothing to lose. So we just wanted to win or finish the group with 3 games. So that was a great game for us. And also the Donaghmore game, like we were down at half time. So like the character to come back at second half and really, like I'm sure we got the 3 goals in the second half of the game. So to get that going, it was really good. And like our backs have been really on form this year, and our goalkeeper Anya Kelly has been flying it as well.
You've been knocking at the door intermediate for a couple of seasons now. How close are you?
Like it's just aggravating. We're almost like the Mayo senior men that like we almost have a curse that we just get to the county finals and we lose them. No, but we are close enough. But like we just like the junior, it's as tough a competition as the intermediate, and like you have those really strong teams coming up from junior. Like you've the caliber of like Kinsale, like came up a couple of years ago and went straight up to senior then, and like the likes of Glanmire and Donaghmore coming up, like both of them being All-Ireland champions and coming straight through. It's tough competition, and that's what's adding to the intermediate competition being so tough. But yeah, we're knocking on the door, but hopefully we'll just give it one final shove this year now and get over the line.
Have you noticed anything different in your almost your mentality this year that you feel that you're ready to take that next step?
Yeah, I think this year we're more kind of gelled as a group, even though like we've obviously missed so much training time over the last couple of months. But no, we're gelling well and we're working well together. And like I find everyone up our work rate we just want it so much really.
And you're talking about work rate, and you'd have to show that work rate against Clon on Saturday evening. The fact this game is in Rosscarbery and you have home advantage, because as you were telling me earlier that you topped your group, how important will that home advantage be on Saturday?
It's like you'd think that, you know, there's not much of a difference between distance between Clon and Ross, but playing on your own pitch makes such a difference. And like we're so used to playing in Ross now, like we've had 2 of our 3 matches, our group stage matches were at home. So we're used to the pitch, and like, you know, Arda is such a wide pitch as well that not every team would be used to it, but we're used to that at now at this stage. So hopefully that'll bring us a bit of advantage in the first 10 or 15 minutes, and hopefully we'll get a good start from that anyway on Saturday.
What's going to be like this week? Looking forward to a match against your closest rivals, Clon, just over the road. Like I said, you met last year in the county semi-final, and there's that much between the teams. So what's this week going to be like?
Well, it'll be it'll be an exciting week. Like, you know, we'll just be on edge for the week. I know last year I was more nervous for the Clon game, the Clon semi-final, than I was for the county final itself. So I can't imagine this year being much different. You know, it's your close game. We all know each other so well because we played against each other growing up, and Clon have such huge underage coming through that we actually haven't seen so many of them play. So it'll be a real test, and yeah, the nerves will be high coming towards the end of the week, coming towards the game. So yeah.
And then you'll be switching in a couple of weeks' time from a county intermediate semi-final to a county senior football semi-final with the West Cork ladies. And before we talk about West Cork, you're midfield for Rosscarbery and you're fullback for West Cork. So what's that like, kind of switching between positions in both teams?
Yeah, I found it quite different at first. Like, say between, like, I was playing midfield and then I was playing fullback then for the Mourne game, and it took me quite a while to adjust because obviously midfield you have more looser role, and then fullback you obviously have to mark more. I felt, you know, it took me quite a while to adjust, but then I, you know, got into the running a bit more in the second half, and then the Aero game, I was more used to it because I'd only played the Mourne game a couple of weeks before. But I suppose I've been playing full back my whole life, bar this year now playing midfield for us. So it's not too much of a change. It's more the midfield role is a different role for me, but getting used to it now, yeah.
Do you feel like, obviously, fullback, there's a tighter rein in you. In midfield, you have that freedom to roam around the pitch. Kind of, is it hard then to switch back when you go back to fullback with West Cork to know, okay, I have to stay in this particular area?
No, I suppose it's not too much different because I suppose like I've been playing full back all along. Like I find myself even playing with Ross, I might hold back a bit more than I should, you know, but just because I have that defensive mindset. But no, I'm able to keep in the full back line, all right.
You caught the eye of our reporter Tom Lyons at the win against Éire Óg. He named you as his player of the match. He said you were outstanding. And looking at that win against Éire Óg, that obviously he kind of followed the draw against Mourne Abbey. He topped the group and go forward. How do you think West Cork are shaping up this year?
Like we're playing quite well considering like we've 2 massive loss of like Niamh Cotter and Claire O'Leary in the middle field, like their presence alone. But no, we're doing quite well. Like we were unlucky not to win against Mourne Abbey, and like we've really pushed on against the Éire Óg game, and like I think we're just getting more used to each other, and like we obviously have been playing with each other the last couple of years, but we're just coming more in terms of each other and that kind of thing, and more used to each other. So I suppose we'll just kind of keep on pushing on and hope for the best.
We saw the draw over the weekend for the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, and West Cork would play either Kinsale or Aghada in the last 4. Like to pick a winner from Kinsale and Aghada is a tough one as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like they're 2 very strong teams and they're up and coming. Like I suppose you can be glad in a way that we dodged Éire Óg and Mourne Abbey, but then you have the other side of like huge caliber of players from both those clubs, like the likes of Orla Finn and Creva and Side, you know, who are all Cork players, really strong players for Kinsale. So, you know, you can't underestimate them either just because they didn't play us in the group stages.
I think if we're looking at it, I'd say West Cork look, touch wood here, a good bet to get back to county final. And again, like Rosscarbery, West Cork have been so close to winning that county title over the last couple of years, and the last 2 county finals, Mourne Abbey have just gotten the better of West Cork. Do you feel there's something different in the West Cork camp this year that you can take that final step?
I suppose there is. There just seems that we're that little more clicked. I don't know, that is it that everyone was working that bit harder over the coronavirus time, that they were just kind of working more on themselves and their physical fitness and that kind of thing, that they're more able for it. Like we were like, that Mournabbey game was as tense as a county final a couple of weeks ago. So we were well up there with them. We just need that final touch to push us over the edge, really, is what we're missing.
Because West Cork have shown over the last couple of seasons, Sarah, like you go toe-to-toe with Mournabbey, who are All-Ireland champions, Munster champions, Cork champions for the last 6 years, and you give them their hardest game of the year nearly every year. So it's probably got to the stage now where it's just about getting that performance in a final to take that final step.
Yeah, like, you see, I think the thing is Mournabbey have that winner's mindset that we probably haven't perfected yet, and they know how to push it over the edge, and they really don't want to lose the county championship. Obviously we don't either, but they just know how to push it on. Like even in the county final 2 years ago, our first county final, we thought we were almost there. We were up 3 or 4 points with about 10 minutes to go, and they came back and they were up a point with very little time left. So they're an unbelievable outfit, and it'll just take an awful lot to beat them. So hopefully we'll do it this year now.
We look at the West Cork team too. Obviously, it's littered with county players, from Terry O'Sullivan as captain, Martin O'Brien in goal, Libby Coppinger, the Kileys, Laura Mahoney, goes on and on and on. And the good news, you're in with the Cork senior football panel this year, which is no surprise, I think, to anyone who's kind of watched you in action over the last couple of years with the Cork under 20s, under 21s last year. You were superb. So to be in with the Cork senior panel this year, how's that going for you?
To be honest, it was a dream come true when I got the call back in October last year. But even the standard of training and like playing with girls that you've been looking up to all your life, even like playing with the likes of Martina and Anya Terry with the West Cork team alone, and then getting the chance to don the red jersey with them and train with them is, a dream come true, really, when you're a young girl looking up to them all along.
You probably feel your own game comes on even more. Then you're marking and training the best forwards in the country, kind of. So even from that alone, it probably kind of helps you raise your game and improve.
Oh, absolutely. Like, even your own kind of, like, I always would have pushed back a bit and let the forward get the ball, but there's no space for that, training, that they've been gone past you before you know it. So you really need to, push on, and everyone pushes on. So at least when it comes back to, your club or the West Cork team, then that you have that extra kind of oomph in you to push it on with those teams then. And that's, yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, Sarah, you're captain of the Rosscarbery team this year too. How special is that for you, like kind of to be captain of your local club?
Oh, it's a huge honour to be a captain of Ross. Like, I've always looked up to like the girls being captain, and they've been such leaders all along. And, to be given that chance to be that leader now, it's a great opportunity for me, and I'm delighted to be given the task anyways.
And hopefully things will go well for you over the next couple of weeks. I want to wish you the very best of luck this Saturday and in the weeks ahead with West Cork too, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Access Credit Union has always been at the heart of our community through good and bad times. We want to continue to play our part in helping our community through the COVID-19 crisis. As businesses reopen, we encourage our community to work together by staying local, borrowing locally, and spending locally. Access Credit Union is here to help.
On Sunday, Courcey Rovers take on Newcestown in what's shaping up to be a huge game in the Senior Camogie Championship. Kieran, you spoke to Courcey captain Karyn Keohane a little earlier. We've obviously spoken to the Newcestown captain a couple of weeks ago, but how's everything going in the Courcey camp so far this season?
Courcey's got off to a good start. They had a good win over Clonakilty. They're one of the real contenders for this title. They were county finalists 2 years ago. I go back to 2017. Courcey's won the county league final, and that was their first piece of adult camogie silverware. So that was a breakthrough moment for Courcey's. They're building year on year. They should be there or thereabouts this year. Kind of, they have the players. Kind of, as you'll hear from my chat with Karen, we talk about their attack. Like they've Fiona Keating, they've Saoirse McCarthy, Linda Collins. Like they're a team with speed, pace, skill up front. But Karen makes a great point that it's the midfield and defence behind them that feed the ball into this full forward line or attack to flourish. So, like I said, Courcey's will be thereabouts. They'll be favourites to beat Newcestown. There's no point in saying otherwise. Newcestown are going into this game with absolutely nothing to lose. They're coming off the back of a win against Immaculate. Everyone will tip Courcey's to win, and they probably should win because they're the more experienced team at this level. And for Courcey's, this is another step in their journey to getting back to a semi-final and a county final. This will put them through to the last four. And it's hard to look past Courcey's, to be honest. But when I was speaking to Karyn Keohane earlier, they're wary of the Newcestown threat. They know that they have it all to lose and that Newcestown have nothing to lose. So Karyn was in good form, as we'll hear now. And I think Courcey's are shaping up for a big season, Jack. We're joined now on the Star Sport podcast by Karyn Keohane, the Courcey Rovers captain, ahead of what's a pretty big weekend for Courcey's, taking on Newcestown in a round 4 game of the Senior Camogie Championship on Sunday evening. What's it like, Karyn? You're a couple of days out from a pretty big game. Do the nerves kind of hit you at this point, or are you well used to the big occasion at this stage?
I wouldn't say I'm well used to the big occasion, but I suppose it's more excitement rather than anything else. I suppose being in lockdown for so long, everyone's just really enjoying playing camogie and being able to get out onto the field. And I suppose really the big thing for us is just the fact that we are able to get out and play these games. Everyone's really enjoying it. I suppose the closer you do get to the match, the nerves do kind of settle in, but I suppose it's those nerves then that drive you on and get you over the line. And I suppose really it's what you do with those nerves. I suppose to rather than letting it affect you, you have to use it to your advantage. Really, I suppose. I am one of the older members of our team, so I suppose you kind of get used to the big match days, and I suppose once you kind of have the same routine going into every game, it kind of does settle the nerves, and it is all about that first touch to settle yourself, really. So.
And over the last couple of years, like Courcey's, you've been thereabouts, kind of in terms of the county championship. I'm going to go back to 2017 for a second when you won the county league. You beat the Glen Rovers in the final, and that was your first piece of adult silverware. How important was that for this team to get that piece of silverware to win a county final?
It was very important. I suppose there was some members on the team. They're on the team 17, 18 years and had never won anything at senior level with the club, so it was very important. I suppose we kind of focused on the league that year as being kind of the stepping point towards the championship. So to get to the final and to win it, it was unbelievable. I suppose to have that in your back pocket, to know that you do have the ability to get over the line on big occasions to win. I suppose the league final is just something that will always stay. I suppose we haven't won anything since, so I suppose I don't know. It was great to win, but that was 2017. I suppose when I went 2020, so we haven't won anything since. So it's kind of the next step really in terms of progressing. Really, I suppose we didn't have a league this year, so we didn't have that stepping point going into championship to build on. So I suppose you're kind of starting afresh this year. You've no momentum coming into championship as such. So it's kind of you're kind of starting off at base again. Really, you don't have that stepping stone from the league to drive on from.
When we go back, like we mentioned, 2017 and even 2018, then was another kind of step forward in this journey that coaches are taking. You got to the county final, and that was a big step forward, like to get the county senior final. Things didn't work out in the final against Inniscarra, but again, it was a big game experience. And I know for all of you, you were soaking up that experience for the very first time. Whether I think Sinead O'Reilly told me a couple of weeks ago that when the national anthem came on, she was like, "What? The national anthem?" Like everything was about that experience. So like you're the whole time learning, getting more experienced, and so on. Like it's bringing you to the point now where you are seen as one of the real contenders for a senior camogie title. And does that bring its own pressure then, Karyn?
Well, I suppose it does and it doesn't, but I suppose we haven't won anything at the end of the day. So we, like, people might see us as a team, but at the end of the day, we haven't actually won anything. Just if you look at last season, We had a lot of injuries. We still have a few girls that are carrying niggles this year. So I suppose this year is kind of more about building a bit of momentum again in terms of like trying to get the girls back from those injuries and things like that. So I suppose if you're looking at Newcestown, the team are playing on Sunday, I suppose they have won a county final, so they have that experience behind them in terms of winning, which we haven't. So I suppose they're kind of recent county champions at intermediate level, whereas I suppose we haven't actually won a county final as such. So I suppose it's kind of a level playing field in terms of the match at the weekend, in terms of like they have won a county final, so they have that in their back pocket as well. We may have the experience of playing in a county final, but unfortunately we weren't on the winning side. So I don't know.
Newcestown are going to come into this game on Sunday evening off the back of a win just last weekend. There was a pretty big win against McKinney. So I was talking to Colette Desmond earlier, and like they're kind of bouncing in training this week. They're on a high after their first ever senior championship win.
Of course, that's understandable. Yeah.
So like kind of how much of a danger do Newcestown pose? Because with the greatest respect to Newcestown, Courcey will be seen as favourites for this game. You know, you'll go in as the favourites. Newcestown will be the underdog. So how wary are you of the threat of a Newcestown team with very little to lose?
Oh, exactly. They have nothing to lose. I suppose they are a team. Newcestown, I suppose, are known as a team that they die with their boots on. You know, so we're well aware that you're going to get nothing easy from Newcestown. They're a massive threat to us. I suppose we wouldn't have played them in terms of like an adult level, ever really. So it's kind of, when you're going into the unknown, you cannot disrespect any team. Do you know what I mean? And especially at senior level, the standard is so high within Cork that there's not a single team in the championship that you can I suppose undervalue or under respect. Like, we have so much respect for Newcestown doing what they have done. I suppose even if you look at the intermediate championship that they played in last year, coming up against a very strong Enniskeane team who possibly would have been the favourites going into that county final as well, and Newcestown to come out on top. It just shows the talent that they have within that group. We have the utmost respect for them, so I suppose they're a massive threat to us going into the match on Sunday.
Like, there's match winners on both sides, but when you look at the Courcey's team, it's Fiona Keating, Saoirse, Linda Collins. Like, you have some seriously talented forwards on the team, and all obviously with the Cork senior team. Talk about the Courcey's attack for a second, Karyn. Like, it's stacked with speed, skill, and scoring power.
Oh, I suppose it is, and I suppose I'm a defender on the team, so I suppose a forward line is only good as if the defenders are getting the ball into them. So if we're unable to get the ball into them, you can have all the talent on the world on your panel. So I suppose what's that saying? Talent or hard work beats talent if talent won't work. So I suppose it's great having a serious forward line on it. You know, I suppose really it's.
And when you're looking at this Courcey's team too, like I said, you're taking it kind of each year. You're getting better and better and better. How much more do you feel there is to come from this group? Because you have a couple of young players, like I mentioned there, like Fiona Keating is still a teenager, and still a lot of young players are coming through. And I know Shirley Maloney is kind of helping bring through young players as well. So how much more is there to come from this Courcey's team?
Well, I suppose, just as I said earlier, like, I suppose last year we did have a lot of injuries on the team. So I suppose this year it's kind of a stepping stone. I suppose we are kind of just getting those girls back from injuries, and there's still 3 or 4 girls that are carrying niggles. So I suppose this year, I suppose our focus is more about the enjoyment of it, and more being like, just, I suppose, delighted the fact that we are able to get back out and play together as a team. We're taking one game at a time, really, rather than focusing on anything. I suppose we all know that the match on Sunday, I suppose at this level now, it's knockout. So I don't know, like, I suppose we are still a team in development, and we would, I suppose, the end goal for, I suppose, every team that are playing would be to win a county. So whether it's going to happen this year, next year, or maybe within the next 5 years, I suppose, I don't know, like, there are a lot of younger girls coming up that are very strong and very talented. So I suppose there is there is huge, as you said earlier, try to bring on younger girls as well. So there is huge, I suppose, potential within the club to drive it on. But I'm not sure, I suppose, a time frame really of when they will, I suppose, we'll see the fruits of the labour or whatever.
Because you kind of mentioned there as well, Karyn, kind of you're taking it one game at a time. And if you go back to the first round, you had a good win against Clonakilty. What were the big positives that you took from that? I think it was 3-15 to 1-9.
3-15 to 9 points, yeah. But I suppose the scoreline probably flattered us more than it wasn't, I suppose, more than the actual game itself. We scored kind of 2 goals towards the end of the game to kind of broaden the gap within the game, but playing the game itself, I suppose it never felt like we were that far ahead of Clonakilty. You know, it was a fierce, tight contest. Clonakilty are again another team that will die with their boots on. They will never give up. They will stay fighting until the final whistle. I suppose the positives from that game. I think we worked well as a unit. We kind of found each other well. Again, like the scores, like the likes of Fiona, what you were saying, I think she scored 2 goals or something in the match. But I think the main thing for us is that we worked well as a unit, and I suppose we didn't give up either. So we stayed tagging on the scores until the end, which was always a positive.
You made a great point earlier, kind of I know I mentioned the Courcey's attack, which is stacked with talent, but for the defence, then, like, you're obviously feeding them the ball, but when you shut out a team like Clonakilty and you don't concede a goal, kind of how much satisfaction do you get as a defender coming off the pitch, knowing that you've kept the team like Clonakilty to just 9 points?
Yeah, no, it is very satisfying. It's always, I suppose, if you can keep your market to not scoring as well, it's kind of, you're gonna feel that bit taller walking off the pitch. But as a unit, like, it's very important to the back line, I suppose, to keep the opposition goalless. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you prevent a goal, or you prevent a point and they end up getting a goal. So I suppose you have to take the wins when you get them as a defender.
And what we've, obviously the game against Clonakilty, there was fans there, and developments this week and today have seen that there won't be fans at GA games till at least the middle of September.
Yeah.
For players then, kind of, what's it been like, I suppose, playing with kind of very few fans and now playing with fans, even though it's championship? Because I was talking to players who played in, like, the Carby Rangers Castlehaven game a couple of weeks ago, and that was a huge West Cork derby, and they said at some stages it just went quiet when you expected a roar from the crowd after a big challenge, or there was nothing coming, you know. So what's that like from a player's perspective?
Yeah, I suppose camogie, I suppose, like, you wouldn't have the crowds in lady sports that you would have at the men's games, but it is, you get a block in, you know yourself, you get a block in and you hear a roar from the crowd, it drives you on. Like, I suppose they are kind of the extra person, so it would have a huge effect on, like, I suppose, on teams' performance. But I suppose the crowds aren't as large at the girls' games as the men's games, so it mightn't have such a big impact. But you do always have, like, say, the locals in the area that will come to every match regardless. So you kind of feel sorry for them missing out on being able to support the team when they have done it, say, their whole life, really.
You made a great point earlier too, Karyn, when you kind of talked about having fun this year, because I think all the championships, it's almost bonus territory, because if you go back to the summer, we thought we'd have no GA season.
Exactly, yeah.
And now we do, and touch wood, the seasons will finish off. So I suppose just the enjoyment of the game, is that very important for all the players? The fact that you're out there, you're training again, you're playing games this year.
It is. Oh, it's very important. And like, even like, people are going into training, say, every week, and they have an extra bounce in the step just because they are really appreciative of being able to get it back out and playing. And I suppose especially this year, the season is kind of so short because of COVID, whereas normally you might go back training, say, the end of January, start to February, you've league, March, April, and then championship doesn't start until end of July. Your next round might, I suppose they take a break then for the inter-county season, so your next round might not be September, October kind of time. So this year, when I suppose the season is so compact, like the final, I think, is scheduled for middle of September, you know, so it is such a short window that I think people are loving the whole fact that the window is so short. And I suppose you kind of have a set program or a set time frame but people are definitely just enjoying it a lot more. Coming down, you could tell that they missed it over things. We kind of say we have our summer friends and we have our winter friends, so it's great being back, I suppose, with our summer friends, and we're just hoping that will continue for as long as possible.
And before I let you go, Karyn, kind of the fact that the season is so short, momentum can play a huge role in kind of deciding who gets to the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, and the finals. So is the kind of the goal for Courcey's, you take it one game at a time, but get a win against Newcestown, get a performance, and then move on quickly to the next challenge and try and build that momentum over the weeks ahead.
It is, yeah, because even if you go back to the Clonakilty game, like, we had nothing coming into the match. Baseline, you had nothing to work off. So, like, even say the first 5 or 10 minutes getting into the game and getting up to championship pace, you'd miss that league, or you'd miss the league performance. So definitely, I suppose every team is in it to win the next game, and I suppose it is important for us to go out there and get that performance, and I suppose then encourage I suppose to try to stay in the competition for as long as possible. I suppose that is the aim, but we are, I suppose, the fact when you enjoy it more as well, you kind of do go out, and I suppose when you're enjoying it a lot more, you're going out there and you're trying to get that performance to keep that enjoyment going as long as possible, really.
I think all eyes will be on social media on Sunday afternoon with no fans there. People will be checking the Cork camogie to check the updates of the game. Come here, Karyn, thank you so much for your time, and the very best of luck this Sunday evening.
Thanks, Kieran. Talk to you soon.
Great stuff there from Karyn. Now, before we hear from Adam Smith, who spoke to me about Katie Taylor's big fight on Saturday night, I just want to pause for a minute to chat about our friends at Access Credit Union. The Star Sport podcast is, of course, brought to you by Access Credit Union, your trusted local financial partner. Just recently, I went through the process of opening a current account with Access Credit Union, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it's changed my life. I was able to open the account online during lockdown, which made the process completely hassle-free, and it was made even easier by the great support provided by Access Credit Union team leader Amanda O'Sullivan, who joins me now. Amanda, I understand you can now apply for a credit union loan online as well.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, you can. If you thought applying for your current account was easy, you'll be delighted when you come to us for your car loan. You can apply online just as long as you're registered for your online banking. A couple of clicks and it comes to us here in Access Credit Union. The personal touch still isn't lost. We'll still bring you back and discuss the loan with you. And you can upload any supporting documents you needed, your payslips, bank statements, that sort of thing. We attach them here to your loan, assess the loan, and you can draw it down online. So we aim to do that all within 24 to 48 hours, depending on when you submit your documents. And I suppose it was something that was in the pipeline for a while, but with COVID-19, it sped us up to provide the service. And it's really worked out well for us. And for members being able to access their funds and still draw down their loan, it's been a great asset to us, really, and to the community. I suppose, typically people always had to come into the credit union to draw down their loan, and for young people who may not be living in the area anymore, we were inaccessible then. So now we're back in the market for these members again, and hopefully they will support us as we are supporting local businesses. And with every €10 spent in the locality, it generates €40 for the local economy. So in turn, the interest that you're paying on your loan in your local credit union goes back into your local economy. So everyone's helping each other with this.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Amanda. And don't forget, Access Credit Union is your trusted local financial partner. Access your money 24/7 from anywhere in the world with an Access Credit Union current account, and enjoy all the benefits while keeping your money local. Friend of the show, Adam Smith, was in West Cork recently at his home in Drinagh. He kindly invited me over to have a chat about Katie Taylor's big fight on Sky box office this weekend. He also spoke to me about the Chris Eubank Steve Collins fight that took place in the county of Cork 25 years ago, one in Millstreet and one in Pairc. It's a long chat, but I think it's worth listening to, and I started by asking him how he was coping throughout the COVID pandemic and lockdown. We're here in Courcey in Drinagh at the West Cork residence of Sky Sports head of boxing development and lead commentator Adam Smith, who has kindly given up some of his time to talk to us on the Star Sport podcast about the return of boxing on Sky and much more besides. Adam, before we chat boxing, I want to ask you about the obvious. We're slowly coming back to some sense of normalcy after the world was ground to a halt by COVID-19. Boxing's back on our televisions, albeit with no fans in attendance, and you're probably going to be as busy as you've ever been over the next few months. But overall, how was your own experience with lockdown, etc., over the last 4 or 5 months?
I think it's been hard for everybody, hasn't it? It's been an unprecedented time in pretty much everybody around the world's lives. You know, it's a global pandemic. It's been a real difficult time for many, and I think it's also been a time of reflection too. I think the most important thing is the health and happiness, security of everyone's loved ones. The NHS obviously in England have done a phenomenal job. You know, we were out every Thursday night, cheering and hollering them, and that's brilliant. And I'm sure most people know people who have been affected quite seriously by COVID. I certainly do. Very, very early on in the pandemic, one of my friends who's sort of late 30s was on a ventilator, so I knew the severity of it quite early. And my dear friend Spencer Oliver lost his uncle, and so I think a lot of people know people that were affected, and some quite badly in England, and I think maybe it's been less so around this area in the countryside of West Cork. But I think it's been hard for people to adapt, but I think also a chance, as I say, of reflection, a chance to spend time with families, it's a chance to really think about what you've done and what you want to do. So I've missed people. I love people. I've missed the social part of that. I've missed working with colleagues. I've missed travelling. But it's been a different form of work. We've had crisis leadership meetings at the beginning. We've all been on Zooms, on Teams, on phone. I mean, I think we all know more technical and operational skills than we ever have. Certainly, I'm useless in that department, so I had to sharpen up pretty quickly on that side. Still not exactly 100%, but so we've found a different way of working. A great deal of it's been at home. I've been into the office a few times, but also we've sort of got on with it in our houses. Us personally, our family back in London, we've had a lot of building work, so we've had builders sort of coming and going, and it's been pretty disruptive time. We've 3 kids, all characters, all different personalities, and homeschooling's been been interesting. But we've had some great time to bond with, and I've actually done some baking. Every weekend I've baked cakes, and that's something I've never done before. So I think maybe we've all tried something different, come out with some sort of memory of it, but it's not over. There's second spikes going on. It sounds like the world is a very difficult and different place at the moment. People are booking holidays and then finding that sort of now it's Spain. Is it going to be France, Germany next? Or is England going to get another spike? Is Britain? The Irish rules are difficult here. It's quarantine. It's there's a lot of worry, I think, out there. So I think all we can do is adhere by what the governments say. We wear our masks. We stick with our families, but we have to get back to work. I think that's really important. We haven't stopped. I mean, we've had 11 channels, Sky Sports channels to fill. Sky News has been massive. Broadband's been really important. So the Sky business has been absolutely at the epicenter as always. So we've carried on working. It's just been a different type of work, and I think it will be maybe more flexible working going forward. We wait before we get back on planes to the States. America's obviously a difficult area at the minute. My sister's over there, and it's tough. It's been hard, but fortunately, my immediate family, everybody is happy and healthy, and that's the main thing. And I think we just got to thank all the doctors, the nurses, the incredible people that have worked so hard through this period and who will continue to work with. And I've always said, look, boxing is a great sport and it's great entertainment, as is all sport. But we can only come back when the time is right, and the time is right now, and it's slightly more relaxed, but we still will have huge stipulations around Eddie's matchroom garden, and so we should. And if there is any necessity for those doctors and nurses and paramedics to be back on the front line, then we pull back immediately as a sport.
Well, before we get into Eddie Hearn's fight camp and the boxing returning on Sky, you just mentioned the new skill you've picked up during lockdown, and that is obviously baking. And we're sitting here in your kitchen in Drinagh, and there's a cake tin on the table. There's a bag of ingredients ready to go. So what's on the menu for today?
Well, as I said, you know, I wasn't a cook, but I started doing a bit more sort of savoury cooking, sort of evening meals. I thought, like, I'm no good at DIY. You know, I'm useless around the house. I can just about look after the kids, or play with them. But I thought, you know, one thing I can do is I can do a bit of cooking in the evening. So I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll try baking. So literally, sort of one Saturday morning, I looked at the shelf of cookbooks, and Lorraine Pascal had a couple of books. And I picked them up, put them down, and I think over the next sort of 12, 14 weeks, I must have made every single sweet thing in her books, you know, from lemon drizzle cake to chocolate cheesecake to Victoria sponges to cookies to, I mean, the whole works, chocolate mousse, the whole works. And one of the cakes I did was, I think it's called a Let Them Eat You cake. And it's actually a big chocolate cake, which is great fun to make anyway, but it is lined with Maltesers. So you sort of, you know, and my son, who's quite mathematical, sort of like quite likes to sort of line them all up. So we're going to try and make this huge Malteser cake in a fairly basic sort of 1960s, 70s style kitchen that the cottage is here in the most beautiful part of the world, the magical part of the world that I love, coming home to West Cork. But it is a pretty basic kitchen, and we're doing it for the farmers across the road, because in fact you probably should be using their modern wonderful kitchen, and they've offered it. But they've given me a mixer. I've got a mixer to use, and I'll try and get some of the whisks and pots and pans out in a bit after the interview. But we're doing it for them. They've done a lot of work on the cottage, helping us cut things down and move stuff and get up on ladders and all the stuff I can't do. They help us out. So we're going around there for a barbecue tonight, albeit in the wet rain. And I'm taking them a big cake to say thank you. So hopefully it will work.
Very nice. Well, during the pause of sport throughout lockdown, Kieran McCarthy, our sports editor, was struggling to fill the sports pages, so he got Orla Cronin, a Cork camogie player, to send in her recipes, and we printed recipes in the newspaper. So maybe we'll have to get you to send in your chocolate cake recipe for next week's Southern Star. But now many of our listeners will be aware Big Time Boxing is back on our TV screens after a barren few months, and on August 22nd, Ireland's own Katie Taylor will be in action on Sky pay-per-view. She'll be in the co-main event of a Sky box office card headlined by heavyweights Dillian Whyte and Alexander Povetkin. Taylor is set to take on Belgian Delfine Persoon in a rematch of their 2019 undisputed lightweight title classic. Two questions for you on this one, Adam. How excited are you about this fight, and was it a difficult one to make, considering the atmosphere that it generated at Madison Square Garden when there was fans in attendance? Was it hard to put these two back in the ring with no fans in attendance?
Jack, the first question is easy to answer. I'm extremely excited. I think it's an absolutely fabulous fight. It's a wonderful rematch. It's a rematch that I was determined to try and make happen as much as I could. And I know, because I know Katie so well, that she wanted it so much. So delighted about it, excited about it, thrilled about it. I think it's going to be wonderful. How hard was it to make? Extraordinarily hard. It really was. I mean, Katie Taylor wants to fight the best in the world. That's what she wants to do. She has a wily and wonderful and charismatic manager in Brian Peters, who always wants to make sure that she gets the best deals, rightfully so, and they have a very close relationship. Same to her trainer Ross Eneme in the States, and her very small team, and Eddie is the promoter. So, you know, there were a number of people. It reminded me a little bit, actually, of when Anthony Joshua took the plunge to fight Charles Martin for the world title, for his first world heavyweight title. And I'd seen Charles Martin fight Glasgow in the States, and he won it because Glasgow's knee went. And I came back and I said to Barry and Eddie, I said, I think that's the way for AJ to go. I think Charles Martin might be the one. And it was really split. Like, half the people were saying, absolutely, let's go for it. And the other half going, oh, hang on a minute, it's an unbeaten southpaw from America. We don't know quite how good he is. You know, is Josh ready for this, etc. So there was one of those, and I was very much in the camp of, you know, I think he is, and let's go for it. And obviously that one worked out. Sometimes they don't, and sometimes you've got to put your neck on the line and say what you believe in. I believe that Katie Taylor was lucky to get away with it in Madison Square Garden. I think it was an extremely tight fight. I think it was a fantastic fight, and I think in the final round was probably one of the greatest rounds of women's boxing we've got. the whole of women's boxing is just electric at the moment. You know, you've got the wonderful sort of story of Terry Harper and her development and her coming through. She fights Natasha Jonas. That's the first 2 British women ever fighting for a world title. That happens in the second week in fight camp, which is a brilliant sort of hors d'oeuvre for Taylor Persoon a couple of weeks later. You know, you've got Savannah Marshall. She was my scholar at Sky. She's going for a world title. Clarissa Shields, you know, so many of them, Shannon Courtney, so many of them go, you know, it's really buzzing. And I think that Katie is the reason for that. And I know that she's always wanted the big fights. So look, the Delfine Persoon fight was a cracker in the Garden. It got a little bit lost because of what happened to Anthony Joshua that night, losing to Andy Ruiz, but it was a brilliant fight. I think Katie got a little bit of the rub of the green that night, and I think that she's always wanted to you know, to sort of prove, you know, she believes she won it, and I think she wants to prove that, you know, that was, you know, maybe a slightly off night for her. And you know, listen, Persoon since then, she didn't qualify for the Olympics, but she's a very dangerous fighter. You know, she was all over Katie that night, and I think she will be again. I personally think, and I said this to Brian in trying to help make the fight, not my job to make the fight. That's up to Eddie and Brian and Team Persoon, and actually Team White, who are involved as well, because obviously it's their pay-per-view, their box office. And I was trying to explain to all of them that A, I think Katie should be in big fights. I think she needs them. B, I think that in such an such an uncharted territory as far as sport goes, and certainly with boxing, when is the next payday going to happen? When is the next big fight going to happen? Is there going to be a second spike? Could she not be able to travel to America for a while? You know, almost like, while the iron's hot, while there's an opportunity, take the fight. And I think that's been the message really from Eddie. It's like, look, you guys and girls have got a great chance to get on with it, you know, to get out of the gates quickly and fast, like Dillion's doing, like, you know, Eddington and Cheeseman taking these fights where maybe they wouldn't have done before, but this is an opportunity because their careers in boxing are short. You know, it's been a sort of sabbatical time. It's been almost like an injury time of inactivity. They need to get going again. They need to make their money, and they need to get on with their careers. So for those who are sharp and fast out of the gates, it's fantastic. And I think with Katie, you know, I was very heavily, you know, she was going to fight Serrano. Obviously, the Serrano situation got complicated because of what she wanted, and the whole sort of, you know, America to Britain, and the, you know, the change of dates and the money and all that. And that's a fight for later down the line. Suddenly, Eddie was like, I'm going to reach out to Persoon. And I'm like, I am right with you. And I said to Brian Peters, Brian said, do you think she wins? Listen, I don't know if she wins. It's a 50-50 fight. I think that the atmosphere, the quiet will actually suit Katie better this time, because I think she's used to the amateurs so much with all sorts of different venues and different noise, and I think she will. I think she'll listen tactically more. I don't think she'll be carried away by the roar of the crowd as much. Now look, that can work both ways, because when you're tired and you need your second win, the crowd can help you, and it would have been obviously a very passionate Katie Taylor crowd, as it tends to always be. That won't be there, but she will be able to listen very carefully to instructions, and I think that might suit her better than Persoon on the night. I'm not sure. My gut feeling is she'll find a way through, and I think she might find a way through slightly more comfortably than she did, obviously, in a fight that many people thought she lost in the Garden. That said, if she loses, we have a third fight, we have a trilogy. So there's always a great story. But I think Katie needs these big fights to get up for. She spends so long in Connecticut, she trains away. You know, if we told her she was just fighting a mandatory, it wouldn't be as good for us on box office, and we want to make sure that, you know, we've got White Povetkin, we've got Taylor against Persoon. It's a cracking Sky Sports box office. Against a mandatory, may not be, you know, someone that people haven't heard of. People know about Delfine Persoon. People thought that Katie was running scared. I tell you right now, Jack, Katie Taylor is running scared of nobody. Okay, she's holidayed with us in America. I know her very well. She is a fantastic ambassador for this sport. She is obviously one of Irish sporting legends. We know that already. But she wants the next 2 or 3 years of her career, the swan song, the Indian summer, to be full of big fights. You know, whether it will be Cecilia Brakas or Amanda Serrano down the line, she wants the big fights. Delfine Persoon is a massive fight, and I think it's a fight that's got everybody excited. It's a fight that Katie Taylor could lose, but I think that Katie Taylor can find a way to win this fight, and I think that she will use it as a platform to just go to the next level. And you know, I really believe there's plenty left in Katie Taylor. I think Delfine Persoon is desperate. She was desperately devastated in the garden. And I think almost rightly so. I think she deserved something that night. She didn't get it. That's the way boxing works sometimes, Jack. She's got another chance. She will give it everything. I just think Taylor might be a little bit too experienced, a little bit too classy, and I think the setting might suit her.
Well, you mentioned Keohane's position as an Irish sporting great, and obviously this is a West Cork sports podcast. She's from Bray, but in the Skibbereen Boxing Club there is a mural of Katie Taylor on the wall, the size of the building. So I think that just highlights the fact that she is a star wherever she goes in the country. And I just want to touch on one more thing before we move off Katie. You mentioned that the atmosphere at Eddie Hearn's fight camp, which you might explain to the listeners just after I asked this question, but her fight with Leonard Atu in Manchester back in November was, I was in attendance that night, and I was privileged to be in attendance because it's probably the best big fight atmosphere I've ever experienced for an Irish boxer. I'd never experienced anything like it. It rivaled any All-Ireland final, any Ireland soccer match in the VV Stadium. The Irish fans came out for Katie that night, and she put on a show. Now, the opponent may not have been at her level, but you made the point there that you think because of her amateur background, the silence in the arena might suit her better. But do you not see sometimes she may thrive off that big atmosphere like she did that night in Manchester? Could it work against her, is basically the question I'm asking.
It's a really good point, and I really wish that you'd come and seen us at ringside that night. My kids were there actually. It was the first time they'd been to boxing, and I think my little girl Tilly was desperate to hold her belt and walk into the ring with her. But listen, they got to hold the belts afterwards, Tilly, Oscar and Jessamy, and that was fantastic for them. It was a special night. You know why it was a special night? Because the Irish contingent there and the Katie Taylor fans were mixed. It was a family atmosphere. It was an atmosphere where children were there. It was an atmosphere where the husbands and wives came out, and it was a special night. She became a two-weight champion. But it does thrive her. She was in Andy Scott's interview afterwards. She was almost in tears. She couldn't really speak. She was so welled up with emotion. And I think it was coming home. It was 10 o'clock at night. Although it wasn't in Ireland, we'd all love to see a fight here. But it was in Manchester. The fans travelled, and I think you're right. I think that does give her a massive boost. But I think she is an intelligent fighter, an intelligent woman, and an intelligent reader of a fight. And I think that sometimes she does get carried away. I think her boxing skills are excellent, and she has adapted from an amateur to a professional very well because she can move in, she can use her body shots well. But I think the one thing that she does sometimes do is she sometimes fights for that crowd, and I think that sometimes she gets carried away. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think that it's something very different. I think, yes, the crowd can give her a couple of rounds, but I think the crowd can also draw her in to want it so bad that she actually, the tactics can occasionally go out the window and she just goes, hell for leather, and we love that, and that brings the excitement and the Katie Taylor drama. But I think also, from a boxing point of view, I think it will be more technical, and I think that will suit Katie Taylor more than Delfine Persoon, because I think all round she's a better boxer, and I think that is crucial in a fight like this. However, we'll only find out on August the 22nd. It could be very eerie, it could be very strange, and if she does lose a few rounds, she won't have that pickup from the crowd, and she'll have to draw on her inner strength. Tell me another athlete who's not got more inner strength than Katie Taylor.
Doesn't exist. But you mentioned that card is on August 22nd. It's on Sky Box Office pay-per-view, and it's happening in Matchroom HQ, or Eddie Hearn's back garden as people are labelling it. So can you maybe just explain to the listeners what we're talking about when we're discussing Fight Camp? Because not everyone who's listening to this podcast will be a huge boxing fan, so they won't necessarily know what we're talking about when we're saying Katie Taylor is fighting for a world title on Box Office in somebody's back garden.
It is quite the most bizarre, ridiculous setup that you can imagine, but it's so innovative and so exciting. My wife Jo and I went to Barry Hearn's 70th party in where the ring's going to be a couple of years ago, and there was big marquees in the garden. What it is, it's the Matchroom HQ is in Brentwood in Essex, and the house, it's a large house which was originally sort of had stables and big grounds, and it was the Hearns residence where Eddie and Eddie's sister Katie were growing up, and they lived there. And then the Matchroom HQ at the time was in, I think it was in Romford, or it was certainly away from, it was another part of Essex, but in Brentwood was their home. And then when they all moved out, Barry got a house, Eddie got a house, etc., Katie did, that then became the Matchroom headquarters. So they work in their old house. So it's like their old garden. And when Barry had his 70th, it was in that garden, it was in Marquise, and it's a wonderful space. It's you know, like here, it's huge sort of field. It's a big, massive garden. It's got plenty of room. In the background, just in the sort of almost in the sunset, you can see the city of London. You can see Canary Wharf. You can see, it's wonderful. So it's a fantastic setting. I mean, we you know, fingers crossed for a dry, you know, 4 fight camp nights. I'm sure we'll get, you know, some sort of scary moment there, as we always tend to do when we're outside. But I believe the forecast is phenomenal for this weekend for the first fight camp with Eggington and Cheeseman, and you know, and all the other great fights on there, Jordan Gill and Reece Bellotti and Fabio Wardley and Valili, a great heavyweight fight. You know, it's a fantastic sort of first night, and Tennyson and Gwynn, great British title, and you know, it should be an amazing every night. They've got 3 Sky Sports nights, Saturday, Friday, and then the Saturday box office. But the garden itself is, you know, it is a garden, and it will be. I mean, Frank Warren's come back. He's come back sooner than us, and you know, they've done well getting the BT studio, you know, COVID safe and all of that. And absolutely, they've gone through all the stipulations. They've done a great job, but it's in a studio, so it's got a certain look, you know. And I think what, you know, Eddie and Barry always strive to do is something different. They've put it in their garden. It's a big risk. It's a massive operation. They've had, you know, trucks and all that going in for the last sort of week or two. It's, you know, there's been drones, there's been, you know, all sorts of things filmed, and you know, and it's obviously all got to take place with safety and with distance. And you know, we did a fighting fit thing, Matchroom did at the start of lockdown, and that all had to be, you know, filmed at distance. So you know, they're abiding by the rules. Robert Smith's obviously put the guidelines down. You know, everything is going to be safe and secure. You know, that's the most important thing. Fighters are isolating in a hotel just down the road, and anyone that's around the fighters have to be, whether you're a broadcaster, whether you're, you know, from the board or a trainer. You know, everyone's got to be tested. Everyone's got to be, you know, isolating together in the Holiday Inn in Brentwood, which is about a mile away. And then on fight night, then they come up, and you know, everyone that doesn't isolate, like I'm not isolating there this week, will only be allowed into certain parts on the night. So we'll be commentating about 10 metres back. So the red zone, which I think is the around the ring, they'll have shields and full sort of kit on. So obviously Matt and I can't commentate with big shields on. So we'll be back slightly more than we used to. But listen, I love things that are different. It's so exciting. It's great having boxing back. I've said to everybody, we've got to have patience. You know, the medical bodies are the most important thing, and have been for the last few months. And we've seen football come back, we've seen cricket come back, we've seen Formula One come back in great ways. I've really enjoyed the end of the football season. I'm a Liverpool fan, so we won the league, which was fantastic. But more importantly, you know, the way it's come back has been really fascinating. You know, watching it, listening to the crowd, you know, almost like just the real sound as opposed to the crowd noise as well. Getting that choice, and you know, I think we've brought it back in a typical Sky way. Everybody's worked so hard. Operationally, it's been fantastic, you know, production-wise. And, you know, I'm in awe about the way that happens. And I'm just lucky to be, you know, calling the fights on the night now as everything around me is set up. And it's fantastic. There's some brilliant people who've spent a lot of time working hard on this. And hopefully, you know, fans, although they can't be there, will be entertained with what they see through their screens, and they'll be first and foremost pleased that, you know, big time boxing, top quality boxing's back. And I think it was really important when Eddie and I sat down and sort of worked it out, and Frank Smith, and they came up with a fight camp idea, and we thought, look, we've got to have really, really good matches. It doesn't really matter what level. Almost you can have a Southern area or a British or a European or a world. It doesn't matter as long as it's a sort of mixture of everything. But the key is we get good fights. I think that's really important, because I think when boxing's been gone for so long, we want to come back and show what we can do. And I think the fighters have stepped up. They've taken, you know, difficult fights, and there's some great matches all the way through the 4 weeks.
Yeah, so exciting times for Sky Boxing with Fight Camp returning, as you said, this weekend, and then Katie's big pay-per-view fight on August 22nd. But now, Adam, we can't have you on a Cork sports podcast and not talk about the legendary Steve Collins versus Chris Eubank fights that were held in Millstreet and Pairc 25 years ago. For listeners of a certain age, they'll remember nights when Millstreet in North Cork became the centre of the universe. There was the Eurovision in 93 and of course the Collins Eubank fight in 1995. Back in March, you spoke to Gavin Casey, a Cork man of the 42.ie, who wrote a great piece to mark the 25th anniversary, and you mentioned that event happened during your first year at Sky. So what are your own memories of the fight and everything that went with it? Because it was a crazy time for Irish sport, for boxing, and for everyone involved.
Jack, in the lockdown period, I think we've all had a chance to reflect on the big nights and big fights and the events that we've been in around the world. And you know, most of us think of sort of Vegas or, you know, New York, Madison Square Garden, or, you know, nights like Bruno winning the world title finally at the fourth attempt at Wembley, or obviously AJ Klitschko or Ricky Hatton's wonderful night against Kostas Sioux. You know, you think of those, but I think right up there was the first fight between Steve Collins and Chris Eubank. I think it just had everything. This is a magical place for me. West Cork, I come back to every year. I love it here. I love the land. I love the beauty. I love the serenity. I love the people. And I think my first experience of Ireland really was through Millstreet. And I think that it was so different to what I was used to. I lived in London. I lived in Washington, DC. I lived in New York a bit, and I came back, and, you know, I was starting to travel around. We had done the Eubank World Tour, which didn't take us around the world. It took us more sort of around Britain. But, you know, actually going to Ireland, there was one in South Africa, which I didn't go to, but when he fought Dan Chaoimh. But, you know, he fought in Maurizio Amaral, he fought Sam Story, he fought Chaoimh. This is completely going off memory here. And then he fought Henry Wharton in Manchester, which was a really big night for us. He fought Barrett Bueno, I think, in Newcastle, or in what was that seaside place in Newcastle? It's gone from me for a minute. Whitley Bay, and then we came over to Millstreet, and I think the brilliant part of it was the fact that there was this fella who is, you know, in Irish folklore, or should be, this chap called Noel C. Duggan. And he was the orchestrator, he was the ringmaster, he was the one that actually had written to Vic Wakeling, head of Sky, and he showed me all the letters. He'd written to Vic Wakeling, the head of Sky Sports. He'd written to, you know, to Frank Warren. He'd written to, you know, to Barry Hearn. He'd written to probably Frank Maloney, probably everyone that was a promoter at the time, you know, to try and get this fight, you know, in. And it was obviously Eubank was a matchroom fighter, you know, Steve Collins. And it was like, so okay, let's go to Barry Hearn. Finally got to Barry and Vic, and Noel and Barry and Vic somehow made this happen. It was extraordinary, and, you know, the Eubank World Tour was a massive thing for Matchroom, and I think that started our relationship with Matchroom. Frank Warren had a lot of other fighters who came around that time in the summer of '95, the Bens, the Brunos, the Nassims, but this was slightly different, and it was. You know, we got two fights out of it in 1995. The September rematch in Cork City, which was a rainy night. We won't get another one of those in Fight Camp. But it was a great fun night, and where Steve, you know, used totally different tactics to bully Eubank. But the first one was special because we didn't quite know what would happen. Eubank was unbeaten at the time. You know, Steve Collins had really been doing a lot of his trade in America. Obviously, former world middleweight champion, and learned under the Petronellis, you know, alongside Hagler and all that sort of stuff, that sort of camp. You know, he was a hard man, Steve Collins, but he also showed how clever he was, because, you know, he employed this hypnotist in quotes, this sort of, you know, this guru, and you know, and he spooked Eubank. And I think because, you know, we were speaking off the record actually, that Eubank had obviously had to deal with what happened to Michael Watson, and I don't think he was ever quite the same again as a fighter. You know, he called Roy Francis in when he fought Henry Wharton to stop the fight, and I think there was probably times, you know, on that March night, you know, the 25 years. God, 25 years, unbelievable, isn't it? 25 years this year that both of them happened. But on that March night, the St Patrick's Day time, that it was just a bizarre one, because Collins he spooked him, and then he outfought him, really. He didn't outfight him like he did the second fight. He used boxing skills more as well, and Eubank didn't quite do enough at times, but it was a great fight, and it was a great build-up. And my memories, up and down Millstreet, Noel C. Duggan on his loud hailer, and he didn't really need it. He just sort of shouted from his tractor, and I mean, literally, he was on the tractor, sort of. They'd had the Eurovision Song Contest there, and he was bringing boxing to County Cork, and it was just incredible, and it was an amazing atmosphere. In this equestrian centre, and the Duggans were wonderful, and it was just Irish countryside at its best, and it was. The Murphys was flowing. It was just so much fun, and being around it as a young, production junior. I wasn't even a reporter at the time. I was really just in my first year at Sky, and I was lucky enough to be here and really just sample it and take it all in. And it was just an amazing experience. I was in the truck on the night. I loved it. I loved everything about it, and it was a great story. And Eubank was toppled. It was amazing ring walk. He came in on that bike, didn't he, Eubank? And it was fantastic. It was an amazing experience. And I brought Steve back sort of 19, 20 years afterwards, and we went to Parc des Princes. We went to Millstreet, and what I couldn't believe was that I walked in, and I met Noel C's family. I met his son and his grandkids, and I said, "Oh, he was so amazing, your father. He was great." And he said, "Well, no, he's just out there on the tractor." And then he came again, 20 years later. I couldn't believe he was still alive, Jack. I mean, he must have been 80 something at the time, and he must have been going 100. And and I said to him, "No." I said, "What's the secret?" He said, "Oh, the potatoes and the Murphys." Fabulous guy, wonderful family, wonderful event. Made Steve Collins. We had a great run with him afterwards. Freddie Roach, all of that. And of course, Eubank he'll live to fight another day. And in fact, in many ways, the losses he had in his back end of his career against Steve Collins and against Carl Thompson actually made him more loved by the fans, because he took his licks, and he went to war, and people loved him for that.
Just to pick up on something you said earlier about the actual fight itself, that Eubank was maybe a bit spooked, and maybe something that happened in the fight with Michael Watson a few years prior had a role to play in that. Could you just maybe give some context for our listeners as to what you mean by that? Because obviously Eubank fought Michael Watson, who was another great British boxer, and unfortunately he suffered life-changing injuries in the ring. So is the case maybe that Chris was less inclined to go for the finish post Michael Watson?
That's exactly right, yeah. Eubank was always a very arrogant man and an eccentric fighter, but I think that what happened at White Hart Lane was obviously, as you said, life-changing. Michael Watson was saved by the amazing work of a neurosurgeon called Peter Hamlin, and the whole thing was very dark. Michael Watson was an amazing fighter. He'd taken Eubank to, he should have won the first. Many thought the second one he was winning. He'd taken Eubank to the well. It needed something special from Eubank at the end, which he found. But it was, it led to a lot of better safety at ringside with the paramedics and the medical. It was very difficult getting Michael Watson out through the crowds that night, and I think that not many people gave him much hope. And he was in a coma for 40 odd days. He had huge amounts of operations, and people didn't think he'd be in any, if he survived, but in any real condition to live any sort of life really afterwards. But it was a miracle, because Michael slowly and steadily came back. We know about these horrendous injuries. Michael Schumacher obviously had one on the slopes, and no one quite knows how he is to this day, and his family guard him, whereas with Michael it was very public, and you saw what he was like, and I think that over those next sort of 2, 3, 4 years he was literally learning to live again, let alone just sort of walk and talk. And I was fortunate enough to be at a function in Essex where publicly Michael walked for the first time again. And then we all followed the story, and he walked the marathon unbelievably, which was an incredible achievement. And Chris, was there by his side, and obviously they had that bond of warrior, as warriors do, of all the sort of, the stuff beforehand that had been said goes out the window. If I always say in boxing, that there's the fiercest of rivalries. Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera's rivalry goes back to a football match they had when they were kids. And all the way through, they were bitter enemies, and I never thought they'd end up being friends. I just couldn't see it. But actually, it was their wives once they'd retired and got them all together, and now Marco Antonio and Eric, and they're from very different backgrounds in Tijuana and Mexico City, and very different sort of types of backgrounds. They have that spirit together. They have that togetherness, and I think that Michael and Chris got that through this, and I think that Chris is Michael's biggest fan, and Michael's Chris's big. Now they have that bond forever, and I think Chris made sure that he was there to help Michael out and to be there at all those functions. And Michael has done incredibly well. He can walk. It's terrific seeing him. He's got no real. It's amazing. Even when Spencer Oliver had that injury, they don't regret what they went through. They love the sport still. They love boxing, but I think it must, sit certainly at an unconscious level with fighters that carry on their careers, that have been involved in near tragedies or tragedies. Some fighters don't make it through, and I think that it's very, very hard for those other ones to carry on. Poor James Murray died in my first year at Sky. And Drew Docherty found it very, very difficult to fight on after that. He was never quite the same. And I think with Chris, he tried to put it to the back of his mind, and he still had the skill set, and he still had the heart and the passion and the drive to win, but maybe didn't quite have that finishing instinct that he would have had, pre-Michael Watson. And that's understandable. So, but Steve, as a fighter, had to take advantage of that. He was down in that first fight. And the second fight, he just didn't give Eubank the space in the room, and he took advantage. But Steve also got Eubank at the end of his career, and he also got Nigel Benn towards the end. So Steve probably didn't get the credit that he deserved. Fabulous guy, fabulous fighter, wonderful, wonderful, Celtic warrior. I loved working with Steve, and I still love seeing him to this day. He refereed a fight that I was commentating on a charity event a year or two ago, and it was brilliant catching up with him. He's a great guy, and obviously Pascal, his brother, trains as well in Dublin, and the Collins are etched in this sport. But yeah, amazing memories, Jack, amazing times. And I think I said a couple of years ago to Kieran how I'd love Katie to come here and fight in County Cork and in Millstreet, and while maybe it's not possible, let's hope in the next 2 or 3 years of her career then something can be arranged, because I think that would be, maybe it would be a sort of swan song, maybe it will be a sort of final thing. I've always thought a festival, I could see a sort of summer festival with families there. You talk about the atmosphere in Manchester, when she fought Natasha Jonas, I was there in Stratford in the Olympics, and that was just unreal, the atmosphere. And I think you could have a massive sort of weekend of it, and we could have a sort of music and some maybe Katie fights and whatever. Maybe we could make it happen, but that would be a dream to try and be involved in something like that before Katie called it a day. But listen, Katie's got work to do, in a few weeks' time against Delfine Persoon, and I'm sure Steve Collins and Chris Eubank will be tuning in and watching it. But yeah, 25 years, it's amazing. It's we've done so much during that. Boxing's had such a sort of journey through that, but it feels like yesterday that I was at Millstreet. It really does, and I'd love to go back and see the Duggan family, and maybe not this year because I've got to get back to London, but maybe next year. And just one final question then on Millstreet before we wrap up. I watched the fight back on Sky last night, and obviously the place was absolutely packed. There was 8,000 or 9,000 people in the arena, and most people who are listening to this will have driven through Millstreet at one point in their lives, and there's no hotel rooms there's no apartments. I was wondering, because most of those fans of Steve Collins probably travelled down from Dublin, where on earth did they all sleep after the fight? Do you know what? That I can't remember. I really can't. I remember us all sort of partying afterwards. I don't actually remember where we stayed, but we must have stayed out as well. We must have stayed in Cork. I think we may have stayed in Cork and just travelled in on buses. I think we certainly stayed in Cork for the second fight. But yeah, I definitely didn't stay at Noel C's house. I know that. I was a junior. I was just starting out on the road. I wasn't sort of, up there, privy to sort of the arrangements. I would have loved to have sort of gone back in time with my job as sort of, now and actually tried to help sort of, construct the fight and be involved in the whole sort of, because it must be an incredible operation what they did, and that's what I mean about the technical and operation side. And they're so fantastic, our teams at Sky and Matchroom. They're brilliant at how they can make these things happen and come to life. But we really have done some crazy things, and Fight Camp is the next in the crazy list. Who'd have thought it? We're coming back to boxing in Eddie's backyard in Matchroom Square Garden. From Madison Square Garden with the first fight with Katie and Delfine to Matchroom Square Garden, such a different place. And listen, we hope it's going to be fantastic. We hope people get back and watch it and enjoy boxing again. Who knows what the next few months are going to hold for us. Hopefully we'll be able to get some crowds back in the autumn, and we can start to rebuild. We're hopeful that maybe Anthony Joshua can fight in front of a big crowd at the O2 maybe by the end of the year. But who knows? There may be second spikes. We may not know, and who knows when we're going to get back to America. But for the meantime, the key is that we keep safe, that the fighters keep safe, that everybody is, as healthy as we can be, and that, we get the best in this situation. We've managed to get the Premier League finished. We've managed to get, test matches done. Now it's boxing's time. It's now boxing's time in the sun. And I believe that in the next 3 or 4 weeks, we've got some fantastic fights at all levels. And we're going to have some great stories and some great fun. So, tune in, watch it. Who knows what the autumn and winter will provide. But boxing's in a great place. And I think that we'll all come back. Everybody's excited about it. And the patience will pay off. And, hopefully by the time we chat, next summer in West Cork, we'd have had a fantastic year. Maybe the AJ Fury fight would have been made by then. Maybe other big fights. Will Dillian get a shot at the world title? What about the women's game? What about the Irish kids that I'm hearing about that are coming through? What about the young English? It's going to be fantastic, and there's a lot to go on, and it won't be long before we're back in Vegas and back in the real garden, and providing broadcasts from there. But in the meantime, it's needs must, and I think what they've done is this innovation of Fight Camp has been extraordinary, and I'm so excited to get there on Friday and really see it.
Adam, as always, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with boxing's return.
Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Access Credit Union has always been at the heart of our community through good and bad times. We want to continue to play our part in helping our community through the COVID-19 crisis. As businesses reopen, we encourage our community to work together by staying local, borrowing locally, and spending locally. Access Credit Union is here to help.
Now, welcome back to the Star Sport podcast. And Kieran, before we wrap up, you might just give us a flavour of what readers can expect in this week's Southern Star Sports section, which will of course be available in shops across West Cork from Thursday morning and online from anywhere in the world on www.southernstar.ie/e-paper. So Kieran, take it away.
We have an action-packed 24-page sports section this week. Obviously, there's a lot of GA on at the moment, and we're GA heavy. Like we've gone through there, the West Cork group of death. We have Castlehaven and Newcestown match report and reaction. Carby Rangers got back on track with a win against Ireland Rovers. We have reaction from both camps. Clonakilty stumped to a heavy defeat against Ballincollig that has put their Premier Senior Football Championship campaign under a bit of pressure. And we've all the rest of the GA, from the derby between Dawneys and Bandon. I was at Ballincollig as Skip beat Ballingeary, Bantry Blues lost. You name it, we have it covered this week. Also, looking ahead to Newcestown Camogie's big game against Courcey Rovers, I had a great chat with Colette Desmond, the full forward who got 3-6 against Imachilly last weekend. Colette missed last year's county championship when Newcestown won the intermediate campaign, but she's back this year and she really made her presence felt. And it's a really, really good interview with Colette, and that's really worth reading. We also have a preview and interview with Sarah Hayes ahead of their big game against Clonakilty. Moving down to a different sport, friend of the show, Phil Healey, I caught up with her, Jack, because she has the first leg of the Irish Athletics Championships this weekend in Dublin. And an incredible story when I was talking to Phil. I won't give too much away, but she suffered an injury during lockdown that was a bit eye-watering, and how she fixed that injury, it was even more eye-watering. So that's in Thursday's Southern Star. Of course, soccer features heavily because it's the business end of the West Cork League, and Dunmanway Town booked their place in the Beamish Cup final against Clonakilty Town. Ger McCarthy, our man, was at the Menways win against Pairc Musgrove, so we've a big report from that. Lot going on too in motorsport, and Martin Walsh has a super interview with Colin Grant from Ballymakeera, who preps cars, so it's a very interesting take on motorsport. So plenty going on, lots going on, and like I said, Jack, well worth the couple of euro this Thursday, either online or just go to your local shop.
Absolutely, and just a reminder there, if you can't make it to the shops, to purchase a copy of the Southern Star online, just go to www.southernstar.ie/e-paper and you can read the Southern Star for less than €2 per week. But thanks for listening to the Star Sport podcast. We'll be back at the same time next week. If you enjoy these shows, please make sure to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Slán go fóill.